Arsenal are back. Last night, Arsenal returned to Champions League action to win their first away game in 7 years in the competition, hitting back after their 2-1 loss to Lyon last time out, and also managed to put a fairly dominant performance against the Europa League champions Seville. Seville are a very tough opposition away from home, and they drew to Real Madrid at the weekend, so this is a brilliant win for Arsenal. And in this video, I'm going to be answering what we learned from Arsenal in this game from a tactical point of view and also a player point of view as well. So if you want to see more tactical insights on different teams and different players and in certain games, please let me know and like and subscribe to watch more of my content. Now overall, Sevilla have always struggled to really replicate their form in the league, which they do in the Europa League. Now they've got a brilliant Europa League record and won it last year despite finishing 15th in the league still. Now that was a competition that Arsenal were in, and yet again they got left disappointed getting knocked out very early on. And with a poor start to the season again this year for Seville, they decided to sack their manager and bring in Diego, who debuted against Real Madrid on the weekend in a very exciting draw. Arsenal set up with the same system they did against Chelsea with the exact same players, and decided to opt of using Jorginho over someone like Thomas Partey or Kai Havertz to have more pressure on the ball and actually just keep the ball a lot more, retaining possession. Now Seville set up in a 4-3-3, which is pretty open, so it's very easy to actually press them in a lot of different chances, but they like doing this because they have a lot of technical ability players that are very high, so they like teams pressing them so they can counter them in the same time. And their team is very much used to not having that much of the possession, so they've got very good counter press players who are very used to, as soon as the Wolves went back, making runs and making that field up the play. And in this game you can see Seville very happy to defend in the low block, which they do quite a lot, and they defend in a 4-5-1 block for most of this game. They're happy to defend for large periods of it, and this is not new to Arsenal. They play against a lot of low blocks very often, and even against Chelsea they struggled to break through their low block by Chelsea with the counter pressing that they used as well. So they've done this a lot this season. They play against Everton, they play a lot of games at the Emirates like this as well. The issue is Arsenal's attack has not really been firing this season. They've still scored a lot of goals just for the sheer quality that they have, but it all together there hasn't really been working and all the parts haven't really been clicking, and it more comes down to just individual brilliance rather than an actual tactical piece that they've worked on. Now very much key for Arsenal in this game was keeping Seville in that low block, because they're not a team that are very used to just low blocking the whole game, and they usually wait for the counter press to happen very soon, if not a couple of minutes into it. And with the ability of the players that they have, they would not just want to sit there and not attack for the whole game, so they will want to go up and try their best to even try and score a goal, create a chance later on. This is also because Seville struggle actually doing a low block for quite a long time. They struggle to get out to the players left and right when teams switch it quick against them, so they will need to sustain possession at some point in the future, and they can't just blow block the whole game, especially with the quality that Arsenal have against them. And something you saw in this game is Seville don't actually have one player that likes to go forward and create the chances. They seem to have anyone who's really in the position at the time, and in this game they basically just waited for Arsenal to make a mistake so they could create chances with different players trying. And Seville are very good at this because it's a unique way of creating control. They have so many different players that can do it, and basically anyone steps up in different positions where it's hard to track. This made it very hard for Arsenal on the night. But what Arsenal did brilliantly in this game was just making sure that Seville actually had the ball a lot and didn't get resorted into a low block where Arsenal got baited into making too many mistakes, and therefore creating the chance for Seville to break on them, giving them more of a chance to score, which they really would want. And Arsenal actually resorted to something they haven't used in quite a while, where they actually just sat back and let Seville play their game, waiting for the counter attack. And we haven't seen Arsenal do this quite a lot this season. They did it against Crystal Palace when they had 10 men and were brilliant at doing it, and they did it here brilliantly again. Arsenal knew they were going into a hostile environment with actually a very good team that can play good football under a good new manager, and they did their best to sit in a mid to low block for themselves to just make sure nothing happened and no creativity could be happening. And with the brilliant technical level of so many of the Seville players, this is such a hard ask, because anyone on the pitch could really contribute or score a wonder goal or do a brilliant cross into the box, so they had to be alert for every single player, even the fullback. And obviously Arteta knew this going into the game. This was definitely his game plan, to hold back and play them on the counter attack, a bit like what Chelsea did to Arsenal in the weekend when Arsenal obviously didn't play very well. This is why we saw people like Jorginho come in to just make sure that they could shore up the defence in making sure there was a bit more cover there, because if Havertz was there he'd go a lot more forward, and Thomas Partey likes roaming. And this is why probably one of the biggest decisions of the night was to play Tomiyasu at left back over Zinchenko. Now there's probably a few reasons why Arteta decided to do this. I mean, a lot of people have been wanting Tomiyasu to start anyway, especially after Zinchenko's awful performance against Chelsea at the weekend. And it is also true that Tomiyasu is a way better defender, so definitely when Arsenal were defending they would probably need him in, which they had an idea going into this game. But I actually think you'll see Tomiyasu start most of the European games, even if in left back or right back. Most likely going to be in left back for Zinchenko, because teams in Europe play a lot differently, and they have a lot of technical abilities, and they will hit you on counters out of nowhere and score some mad goals. And Tomiyasu's defensive assurability and experience in Europe will probably be a lot more useful than Zinchenko. It will still be good, especially when Arsenal are playing it at the Emirates against probably, you got to think, Lyon and then Seville in the rematch, because they have a lot more pressure on the ball and have a lot more field tilt. But in these games where they're sustaining a lot of pressure against them, they need a proper assured defence, and someone that's going to be playing out of the box that can't really defend one-on-one is not going to help. And although Tomiyasu didn't do anything outstanding, I do think it was just definitely a better shout than putting Zinchenko in there, because it gave Arsenal a lot more defensive assurability. And other than in spells in the end of the game, right near the end, and a bit of the first half, Seville really struggled to create many really key opportunities, and their XG in the end was only in 0.7, which is a penalty equivalent, so they even didn't really deserve their goal in sense from the XG perspective. And Arsenal, who had a lot less pressure on the ball than they usually do, had an XG of 2, creating a lot more chances when they had less opportunities to do so, showing how good of a counter-attacking team they can be as well. And yet again, later on in the game when Arsenal were 2-1 up trying to protect that lead, we saw what Arsenal did so well at Crystal Palace as well, how they are so good at defending when there's a lot of pressure on them, because they got the big men on the pitch. They had Raya coming out claiming crosses, they had their 4 centre-backs, Rice, and also having Havertz back for set pieces, which is obviously so many tall assets that it's going to be very hard for Seville to create anything from them. And obviously Arsenal is set up to be a more ball-playing side, they would rather have the ball, but in Europe that's not always possible, and I think Arteta has learned this after the long game, that he can't just expect to control every single game. So it was really smart by him in this game to just put that back and just put the curtains down and just try and defend for most of it and get them on the counter-attack, and I think Arsenal did that brilliantly today. But playing like this is a lot more risky, especially away in a very hostile environment, and Arsenal had to be sure they had some players that really stood up, and yet again there was 2 players that I thought were absolutely phenomenal in this game. The first one is Declan Rice. Yet again, I feel like every single Arsenal game where they play well, we're talking about how good Declan Rice is, and even when the team isn't playing well, we're talking about how good he is as well. This guy is absolutely insane, and I gotta admit, he's probably one of the best 6s in the world and one of the possibly best 8s in the world as well. I mean, people don't want to say how good of a sign he was because he cost a lot of money, but the amount of impact he's having as Arsenal team, honestly, I genuinely think it's worth how much they spent on him already. He's been absolutely phenomenal. He's so good in a 6 and he's so good in 8, and in this game he was so good. He's so good at defending as a proper 6, being back in the box for corners, for set pieces, and also just making sure nothing goes wrong to them defenders. Seville really struggled to create many chances and had a lot of the ball when Declan Rice is just sitting there defending everything. In this game he won 8 duels, he won 8 recoveries, he did 5 defensive actions, he did 1 block, 1 interception, and was just absolutely amazing the whole way around the pitch, proper putting himself on the line yet again for the Arsenal. And the other player who was absolutely phenomenal in this game was Gabriel Jesus, who is finally back, and it just seems like Champions League is his level compared to the league. I heavily criticised the tactical point of view of Chelsea, but in this game you can't argue. He's so good on the counter-attack, a brilliant assist and a wonderful goal, and he basically won Arsenal the game single-handedly. Much better from the Brazilian. There was also great performances from people like Martinelli and Saka as well, who I thought were very good going forward, and I get there is still concerns around Raya and Odegaard, but I'm sure they will come good, and I'll do a video about them too as well. Honestly, this performance is very special by Arsenal, and it really shows they can compete in Europe as well. I think it's the real first indication of that against a proper top European side. Let me know what you guys think about performance, and let me know what you think about some of the players' performances such as Odegaard or Jesus or Declan Rice. Please let me know in the comments.